Hey everyone, James Calendar and Bradley Jeffcoat here, HRVO Workplace Guide, and we're back with another episode. And today we're talking with Natasha Kelly. Natasha's background and experience are phenomenal, and just something that we're super excited to share with you from many perspectives, from an HR perspective, from a business leader perspective, and even I think Natasha would talk a little bit about it as well, but from a potential searcher perspective. So. Natasha most recently held the VP of Human Resources for Highline Warren, which was an aftermarket automotive company supporting more than 30,000 SKUs coast to coast. Prior to that, she spent more than 17 years with Graham Packaging and several leadership roles, progressive HR leadership roles within that organization over 17 and a half years. I think, Natasha would talk about it as well, but she's actually a free agent now. So I like to use sports terms. But Natasha's most recent venture has moved on, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looked like and how we got to this point. But I think, if you're watching this is a great opportunity for you to look at a potentially amazing HR leader, strategic business leader that can come in and help grow your organization, really set the things in place that you're looking for. But with that underway or that behind us, Natasha, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. This is a great opportunity. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, so one of the things I, try to do a little research before coming into the podcast with a guest, and I saw a recent post that you made about too young or too direct feedback in your career, right? And that's very recent. I think it was like the last hour that you shared that you've gotten that kind of feedback. And I got that early in my career that I was too direct. And that was I was in an organization, a large organization. I was 23 years old, but I was trying to get into a leadership role, and I thought I was prepared. And the feedback I got from my AVP at the time, because I was in financial services, was that I was too direct. And what does that mean? What does that even mean when you get that kind of feedback?
Yeah, so that's a great question to start off with, and something I've struggled with, in my career. And a plant manager early on, I think I was 23, 24, same age. I had just started at Graham, and he brought me in, sat me down, and he's like, "You're too direct." And I'm like, "What? I don't understand." He's like, "Well, you don't sugarcoat anything, which is good, and it's good for manufacturing. But what you need to understand is you've got to come across a little bit softer, but getting your point across." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Think of it this way. You're in HR, you want to play black and white. That's direct. We don't need an HR person that's black and white. We need a gray. You need to be gray." And I have stuck with that my entire career. So when it comes to those hard, fast policy procedures, making decisions, I try to play in the gray, meaning play on both sides and figure out the best decision forward and not be so direct or black and white.
That's incredible. I went through this leadership course one time, and so many times in life we talk about win-lose situations, right? And what I try to stress to people is that what we really want to do as leaders, we want to get to win-win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as HR partners, there are win-win solutions to just about everything we do. And how do we get to that as a leader so that we're not winning as the leader, but the employee is losing as the employee? Or we're winning as a business, but the leaders are losing because they have to do extra work. How do we find that win-win ground? So, in your experience, there's a lot of similarity there between that too direct and operating in the gray and that win-win situation. How do you get there? How have you found best practices to get to that win-win solution?
So absolutely, it's been a journey to get there because at first, again, I was so black and white that it was, nope, this is what it has to be. And I quickly learned if you want to be a true HR partner and what this profession has evolved to in 20 years, you've got to be a partner and you've got to understand the operation. So when I say no, I'm not saying no, we can't do that exactly as you want to do that. I'm going to get us to yes. So it's a win-win, like you said, on both sides, but we're going to do it the way that is most legal, ethical, and the right thing to do for the company. Because I see HR as, unfortunately, the conscience of an organization. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what we are. But I don't ever want to be the stopgap that says, no, we can't move an organization forward. I will help us get there to be that win-win, and listening to both sides, hearing, repeating what I've heard, saying, okay, I got this, let me come back with a solution, or it might be top of mind right then. But getting to
I
that
think that
win-win.
I I think that's what sets a lot of HR, elevates a person in their HR career. So many times we just black and white. The policy says this, and that's okay. The policy is there for a reason, but it is our job to evolve with the business and
Absolutely.
evolve policies and practices, approaches with the business. Briley made a comment during a recent episode we had about policies changing all the time, and that's not what I mean by that. I can't change the policy every time the situation
A
comes
new
up to
situation
accommodate.
comes
Yeah, I
up.
can't do that to accommodate this person, and I want to be favorable for them, so I change the policy here. But when business needs change, I think it's important that we understand the impacts our policies have on those business needs. And if the policies need to evolve over time, perfect example is technology, right? And I bring new technology in, my processes and practices and the policies may need to change. They may need to evolve to adapt to that. So how have you found, or do you have any examples of things that you've, you know, a business leader came to you like, oh, this is just broken, and where you were able to operate in that gray and get to a win-win?
Absolutely. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, it might have been longer, because again, like you said, long tenure in one company, everything kind of morphs together on timelines. But I had an operations leader that I worked with, and I was always known as the red plant turnaround HR. So every time we restructured, I moved into the tough plants, and we went into a set of plants, and they were, out of the 30 some facilities, they were always at the bottom. So there were six of them, and they ranked 26 through 30 consistently, like they were at the bottom. And we just started doing a deep dive, and we found that it was like the Wild Wild West. So there was really no structure around how the work, was getting done. It was more focused on, we're on fire, we don't know how to get out of the fire, and how do we move forward. So I partnered closely, and we started developing what we call the playbook, basically your standard work but with a
Saw
fancier
that the
name.
HR playbook,
We
the
started an
Project
HR
Reset.
playbook.
Yeah,
So I have developed an HR playbook. It evolved over time. I think most recently at 110 plays in it. And it's basically a structure of the policies and procedures with real life examples, way to make decisions, and just put a structure in place. Now, that didn't, say this is what we had to do every single time, we went to the playbook, but it was a good way to have those unwritten rules, unwritten policies more clearly defined as what the business needed. So at the time, Graham needed a lot more structure in those facilities because we needed to turn those plants from the bottom of the list, because by the way, they were our biggest EBITDA drivers. So they were dragging the whole company down EBITDA wise just because of how they were performing. It took about 6 months to start to turn one, another 6 months to turn the other, and then they evolved. And as soon as their EBITDA revenue went up, it turned the whole business. But it was just as basic as putting that HR playbook, and it sounds simple. It was many, many months of developing that, working with, multifunctional teams across the business to say, does this make sense? Finance, EH&S, procurement, etc. Put that in place.
I love that you're talking about EBITDA because we don't see a lot of HR professionals, one, talking about it, but two, even understanding what EBITDA
Mhm.
is and what it means. And I tell all my leaders, when someone's getting into leadership or come to me, hey, I want to grow, what should I do? The first thing I always tell them is understand financials. You need to have a solid understanding and comprehension and just practice of financials. You need to know what EBITDA is. You need to know what productivity is. You need to know how to read a P&L. You need to understand, income statements and balance sheets. And you need to know all these things because when you're an operations leader, an IT leader, you need to understand ROI. You need to understand all these things that you're doing and how they're impacting really EBITDA at the end of the day. Or, you've got to know those things. And you don't see that a lot. You don't see that a lot of disciplines outside of finance, and then your C level. A lot of times, your C level will have those. I will, I, this is a completely subjective number, but I would say that I would probably venture as far as saying 90% of successful leaders, mid-level and entry level, frontline and mid-level leaders understand financials, thorough understanding of financials, and that sets them apart. That helps them run the business, helps them operate,
Hmm.
helps them set dashboards and metrics and KPIs and meet those KPIs and all of those things. So I think that's I love that you went down that route of tying that into actual EBITDA and the business success. You were
So whenever you
seven.
say, yeah, I was about to say you were with Graham for 17 and a half years. Whenever you were a young professional and you were 23 or 24 starting with Graham, did you have all of that knowledge of the financial side of it as well? Or at what point did you realize, hey, this is a part of a business need that I need to understand?
So not to call Graham out, but I came in right after an acquisition, and every single day we would have a leadership meeting. So I'd sit in there, and then once a month we'd go over financials. I will tell you at that time it went over the top of my head. I had no, I just sat in the room. I'm like, okay, great, sounds good. Well, then every month, this is a funny story, I would get an extra check. No one ever told me what this extra check was. I just would get extra money. And I was one of those people that I'm like, I was young. I didn't know what to do. And I put it in a separate account because I'm like, I don't know, at some
They're
point
going
they're
to
going to
ask for
ask me
this
for
You
this
thought
back.
they were going
back.
to come take it back.
I better be
We've been giving
prepared.
you too much money. Give it back.
So at some point, I think like 6 or 7 months in, they hired a new HR leader that I ended up starting to report to because at the time I reported to the plant manager. And he goes, oh, by the way, here's your monthly bonus payout. And I'm like, oh, well, that's what this has been for the last, and he's like, well, yeah, this ties to, our metrics and how we're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't understand. Well, then I was bound and determined from that day forward to figure out, all right, well, how do I know how much I'm going to get every month to budget to understand? And I fully embraced that at that time, went to the controller and made him walk me through line item by line item so I was educated. And then I continued to upkeep that education so I understood. And so another metric, ROEs or MOEs is how you measure manufacturing. How does that tie back to the P&L? Where does that drive those numbers so that I understood? And so it was more of like I fell into it, but then it became very useful because each progression step, I have fully understood what the ask has been from the organization by understanding that P&L.
Yeah, and it
How'd you
really
get
does
into
set you
HR?
apart in your career.
How'd you get into HR, Natasha? Where did that start?
So that's a funny story. So what you also don't see is I also have a bachelor's of science in equestrian studies. So I had a full ride scholarship to the University of Findlay for the equestrian team. So I was going to go ride horses. That's what I was going to do. Until I learned you had to work with people more than the horses. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that for my career. That doesn't sound like fun. I don't want to be in horses. You don't make a lot of money. Like, it's long hours. And I'd already started a business degree, and you had to take some, extra classes. So I had some HR classes. And about, I don't think the second semester, the professor came to me and said, you know what you should really consider? And I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, you really need to
Please
go in
tell me.
HR.
Yeah.
You have a natural ability to read people, understand numbers, and I have seen that in the last two classes. He's like, you have a strong intuition, you're very empathetic, you understand what's being said. And I was like, oh, okay. And the more I thought about it, it made sense because HR was very natural. It was very easy. That's what I have my master's in as well. And it just kind of stuck, and that's how I started. But I was challenged by that same professor that said, well, at this point, this is 20 plus years ago, you can't just go into HR. You need to go into supervision or something else. Me, being the stubborn person I am, I was like, nope, that's not going to happen. I, no joke, graduated on Saturday and started my HR career on Monday.
How did what help you 17 and a half years? So I did some research. The average tenure of a professional in the United States in 2024 was 3.9 years. So you're four times that average tenure at Graham.
Yes.
Like there's so many things that happen in the course of a year, much less 17 and a half, between leadership change, position change, job title change. What kept you there? What's working there that's just like, yeah, I've got to stay.
So funny, probably every 3.5 years, we had leadership changes at the top. That was kind of Graham. So in the 17.5 years I was there, we had 5 complete leadership changes. So I came in, sat at a single site under one leadership. It was part of the Owens, Illinois Grand Packaging acquisition. And then it just, grew from there. At some point, it was a publicly held company. Then it went back to a privately held company. And every time one of those shifts would change, it would change leadership. I thought about this the other day. I reported to 8 different people while I was there at Graham. So quite a arrangement of different leaders, different styles, how work got done. It shifted a lot. So when you talked about or Briley, excuse me, when you talked about the ever changing, objective, it was constant and it was never boring. I will say that. It was always growing, always trying to get better, and every opportunity lined up when it needed to line up for me. So I was very lucky while I was there.
A lot
You
of
said
times
that it
people
went
get so
from
frustrated with
private.
change. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Riley.
You said it went from private to publicly owned at least once within that 17 and a half years. What noticeable differences did you see? Because I've only ever worked for privately owned companies, and I don't think I ever want to work for a publicly traded company. So, what differences do you see in the leadership styles there?
It was definitely more driven towards board member report outs. There was a lot more metrics tracking, a lot more that had to be reported, out to, your financial institutes. And so it was just a lot more tracking of data, what people were doing. And then when we went back to privately held, a lot of that stuff went away, but it was a lot of tracking. I remember pulling a lot of data every single month for numbers.
Yeah. Were the people any different, or because some we say that HR is black and white, and I hear these rumors that whenever you've got a privately held company, you get away with a lot more. There's a lot more leniency, but whenever you're publicly traded, there's more eyes on you. So, was there different leadership styles within those two components?
There was, I will say, we did get very lucky when we were public. They brought an individual, I will say it was one of the, I only knew him for probably a year and a half, but he was a brilliant individual, very empathetic leader. I think it was the first time I was really around a true empathetic leader and got to witness how he brought that organization together. And he wasn't a finger pointing blame type leader. And so it was just very different on how he led. So it might have been a different experience for other people when they're
Yeah.
public because just the way he led, he made it feel like you were still part of the team and not, oh, we've got to make our board members happy. I just knew there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot more metrics, but we got lucky with that
Of
individual.
course.
We talked with a guest recently, Javon, about emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace, and we really focus on that. And I love to hear your perspective on the empathy and that being a brilliant leader, because I do believe there's a direct correlation between emotional intelligence, empathy, and just sound great leadership. Is that your experience as well? That the empathy is a catalyst and quality of leadership?
Absolutely. So I've been very lucky on who I've worked with and not necessarily directly reported to, but have been my business partners. And you can tell a huge difference between the people that are true empathetic leaders and the ones that say they're empathetic or servant type leaders. They lead completely different. They want the whole group to go forward as a group, but be successful. And even your weakest player on the team, they will make one of the best players in that division. And they really, truly understand how to reach that individual. I've seen it many, many times in plant managers. The red plants are on fire plants. I will say it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you have all this plastics experience, you have all this manufacturing and engineering. Plants turn around faster when you have a true empathetic leader that understands how to have HR on the right, finance on the left, and move the business forward.
So, are you telling me that a good leader does not have to be an industry expert to be a good leader?
In my opinion, yes, and I've seen
That
it
is
time and
mind
time again.
blowing. It's like we share the same. opinion there, and
Yeah.
I struggle a lot of times with leaders in my career that I don't you don't have to be an expert in this industry to get amazing results. You don't. And a lot of times people think that like if you don't have 20 years experience in this industry, you can't be good. I do agree that maybe that learning curve
Yes, would be
is a
different.
lot quicker, right? I can get that person onboarded in 30 days and not have to spend the extra 2 months. But if it's a good leader, I will put money on it that if it's a good leader, they're going to be motivated to learn the industry quick as well. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter how complicated your industry is, they're going to spend the time, energy, and effort to learn the industry and just be really good at the industry because they're already good leaders. And I can get somebody industry competent much quicker than I can get them to leadership competent. That
Mhm.
if they're lacking in both categories.
Yes, I
Absolutely. And
came on to the company we work for now, and I knew nothing about construction. Definitely didn't know anything about engineering, and so I literally just took it as a chance. James took a chance on me, and now I'm ate up with construction. I'll probably never work out of construction again because I love it so much. But it was a curve for me, and I think exactly what James said. You just have to find people who they want to invest in that knowledge, and they take the chance to just go out there and learn what they can and be good leaders.
yeah, and I can't take 100% credit for that. I've just been promoted to the HR regional role, and the individual I reported to was phenomenal. I really enjoyed reporting to her. And I remember us having a conversation once, and she's like, "Well, you can be a plant manager, you can be a director of ops." And I said, "No, I don't have any knowledge." She's like, "Nope, that is not what it takes to be a true leader." She's like, "You have all the qualities and traits to go in and make plants and operations successful." And I've had a lot of time to reflect on that. You know, it's probably been 10 plus years ago. And in my experience, just like yours, James, I have watched it happen time and time again. And it finally, I think about 2 or 3 years after that conversation, it made sense. And I'm like, I get it now. And I see it. And I've seen it firsthand. And by putting the right hire in a facility is where you can really get the driver.
Yeah, I would just Im immerse myself into the business and understand just the ins and outs. And I was very good on the operational side and the safety side and all of those things in the plant. And I always said the only difference between myself and an operations leader was that I didn't want to get the 2 a.m. phone calls when the machines were down, and I didn't want to have to get up at midnight to go to work. I didn't want to have to do that, and so I never went into the operations side. Now we have to do our other random things, right, from an operations perspective or from an HR perspective to support off shifts and graveyard crews and stuff like that, and that's fine. But I don't want the impromptu phone calls at midnight about, hey, this is down, what should I do? Or that was the least appealing part of going into the operations side for me.
Absolutely. And so it's funny you brought that up. So another story time. When I sat on a single site HR, we were the safety, the first contact of safety. And so I got plenty of 2 a.m. calls, and some of them I'm like, I don't know. I'm not standing there. I don't know if the employee needs to go to the emergency room or they, bleeding, call 911. But it's funny you said that, get those 2 a.m. calls. I remember getting those.
It's about equipping your people too. I was safety and HR in the last stop, and I had a manager call me. It was 7 p.m., so it's not 2 a.m. 7 p.m. shift change. The manager called and said, "Hey, I think so and so is under the influence of alcohol." Okay, why do you think that?
Do something
Well,
about it.
they start telling me, well, they this and that. I say, okay, what do you want me to do? I said, I'm not there. I'm
Yeah,
not there. You've been trained on this. You know how to spot the signs of someone that's under the influence of drug or alcohol. We've gone through leader training. We've gone through certifications. You know these things. What are you experiencing? Well, I'm just not sure, and it was that level of uncertainty, but I wasn't there. And it wasn't like, hey, somebody's lost a finger. Can you come to the office? So it wasn't that. And I just told the leaders, you've got to handle this. You've got to make that decision like what's actually happening here? I'm not the one, I'm not the eyes and ears right now. But that's the same thing is that you equip your people to handle the things that they need to be able to handle. And And come to find out, the individual I did ended up going up there, and the story was not as clear as what it was when I came in. The person's sweating profusely and his like eyes. I'm like, and it
Oh my
reeked
God.
of, and the individual reeked of alcohol. I was like, you got to go, man. You can't be here. Why? I'm like, you know why? You got to go. And so, it wasn't, and that's why I had a coaching session with the leaders. Like, hey, that's obvious. Don't be scared to make a decision. I would rather you err on the side of caution than
Absolutely.
let somebody work potentially under the influence of something and someone get hurt, them get hurt, or get someone else hurt. That's not safe. And
Yeah.
so equipping people to do those things is important too. Like when we talk your career growth, 17 and a half years, there was a lot of development that went in there too. So what did development look like to grow in your career? Is that you going proactively finding things? Is that your leader giving you things to do, classes to take, mentorship? What does that development look like for someone wanting to grow in their career?
I went into Graham and I was told, you're not going to be like our last HR person. And again, young career, I have no idea what that looks like. I'd only worked for one other company for a year and a half, and they sent me to blow molding school. So right off the bat, started in HR, I went to blow molding school and I learned how to blow a bottle on a Graham wheel. Doing other than I was taking this class on how to make a bottle. So that was my first introduction. And then from that day forward, when I got home out of that training, back in the plant, I raised my hand for everything. You name it. That's how I got safety because no one else wanted to own it. All right, fine, I'll learn safety. I, took many OSHA classes. Can pretty much quote a bunch of OSHA
And they're just
standards.
as boring now as they were then.
Yep, it's
Very important, but still boring.
but still boring. So just in any finance courses, any courses Graham had, we had a rotational program. At the time, we had a lot of leaders come through that I worked on with HR. I took a lot of development courses. I took courses outside. Graham also paid for my master's degree. And so you're like, wow, you were there 17 and a half years. At the time, I signed a piece of paper that said I had to be there 3. And I was like, wow, I'm going to make it 3 years. And I was there clearly a lot longer than that. I've had great leaders that say, I went to Sherm conferences, I went to many HR conferences, anything that came up, lots of legal conferences, I just immersed myself and I still do that to this day. I know people say lifelong leader, but that's me. I'm very curious. If I can't figure something out, I will go research and just to research and figure it out or find an expert to have them walk me through what does this look like. I also got lucky at Graham executive coach that I still actually meet with now. I meet with her outside of this. And it has made me think differently, taught me different skill sets, how to really be strategic. And it's not just a fancy word, but what are the actual attributes to being strategic? And so that's when you ask about courses and what I did, I just raised my hand for anything and everything.
A lot of times people get this, and I see it all the time, but just like you're talking about, I learned for some really great leaders, and we adopted or used a critical experience model for leadership, 70% hands-on experience to grow. And what we did, and I loved it, it was, hindsight looking back, it made a lot of sense. We'd take someone that was a finance expert or, professional, and they wanted to grow, and then they would go spend 2 years doing plant management, right? So it wasn't a knock and roll, but they would go a lateral experience. Now they went and got operations leadership plan experience, and then they would go get, a different level, maybe a regional experience in finance. So they moved and shifted in responsibilities and territories and exposures, and maybe they were in a certain type of facility and they moved to a different facility. So they were gaining critical experiences. And then we had it on minor levels as well. Somebody wanted to move into another role, and they'd spend a 2 week session on a project, right? So they're supporting a project that's outside of their normal scope. I see it so many times though when we propose those type of experiential learnings to people, they immediately come back like, well, am I getting a raise for this? Or are you
Yes.
giving me more money for that? What is your response to that from an HR perspective, a learner perspective, and a business leader perspective?
Now, luckily, I've only had that happen a couple times in my career. The most part, when people are in those leadership opportunities, they're very welcome to be in that opportunity because they know the outcome is going to outweigh the immediate reward. And that is the feedback I give those individuals. I understand, but you've been seen as a high potential leader or a young leader that we see a lot of potential in. Going through this experience is an experience that most people will never get the opportunity to be able to do. And if you stick with it, the reward will be a lot larger than the immediate satisfaction of getting a pay increase or the reward right now. And that, most of them went back, thought about it, and came back and said, yep, I want the opportunity. It makes sense. And I will say, I do know of four of those individuals that I worked with kind of one-on-one that are now VPs and CO positions in a couple different manufacturing facilities that started out in that rotational trainee program. Graham did that for a couple years and kind of fizzled out. We started it back up, but I know there's a lot of value, and to organizations that truly pay into it, it does pay back in rewards for having that employee that's very well rounded and can understand the business and talk all the sides of the business.
Yeah. So James mentioned that you were a free agent, as he says. How is your job search going now, and what are you doing versus the traditional job search that was 10 years ago? So resumes and going knocking doors, we don't do that anymore. So what are you doing now to find that new role?
So currently,
Yes.
yeah. So that's a great question. And it was one. I hadn't really paid that close attention to the job market. I just knew hiring roles was a lot easier than it had been. Obviously, we started with an AI tool to
Mm-hmm.
sort and filter resumes in our ATS system, and I didn't have a lot of like firsthand knowledge because I was hiring ops positions, engineering roles, higher level positions, and so very specifically looking for that on the backside of LinkedIn. Now being on this side of LinkedIn and the looking for a new opportunity, new role, I've done a lot of networking, a lot of reaching out to who's on my team, who I've worked with in the past, how do I grow into the next opportunity, and be able to put myself, out there speaking. I've done a couple of engagements, outside of this one to, help facilitate that growth. I've also partnered with an executive search firm that is a coaching opportunity to put me in front of the right people to be able to find that next opportunity.
So I think a common denominator of every single episode that we have had is networking. Every single individual that we have talked to has said that they think networking is an extremely valuable contributor to their career. Do you think that that has gotten you? So you were at Graham for 17 and a half years, but do you think that that will help you in your next career advancement? Do you think that will be the driving factor?
Absolutely. And early in my career, I didn't understand what networking is or was. It was not something taught to me in school. I went to my first job and they're like, we're going to a networking event. All I know is I went to a room with a bunch of people talking, and I was not quite sure. Right, I'm in my young 20s, people twice my age, all in this room, and here I am going, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing.
Do I even
Okay,
fit
great, I'm
here?
at a networking event, and over time, I've developed that skill set. What does that look like? Not just, hey, do you have an opportunity for me, but building a relationship so that when an opportunity comes available, my name comes up in the conversation. And that's where
Hmm.
people really need to focus. And I really feel for college grads right now. I've thought a lot about that. I'm like, how are they getting roles right out of school, because their networks aren't going to be as robust as somebody that's even been in a HR role maybe 2-3 years, right? They've been
Hmm.
able to connect. And how do you really get into that side right out of school?
Yeah, it's
We
tough
chatted
for
with
sure.
Jessica recently, which is she's been in the career center role at a university, and then now she's in a entrepreneur and innovation role at the same university. But we chatted with her recently about that very thing, right? And the importance of an upcoming graduate or a recent graduate really just diving into the whole networking piece And it's not just, going to that event, but it's the follow up and the connection and the small interactions and the pieces that you're doing to stay in touch with those individuals that you meet at those events, because that's where that network really gets built. And I think she made a good comment, and I think you've made kind of touched on it, but it's about what I can do for you as well as it is. And so I'm not asking for something with nothing in return, right? I'm not going and having a drink with you the night before and calling you say, "Hey, Natasha, can you hire me?" That's not networking. So if that's your approach out there and you're watching this, don't do that. That's not the way to do it. But we build those relationships and the connections, and we just get to know people. I can't, and you probably get them. I know Bradley gets them. I get them all the time on LinkedIn messages from people. They connect and then they ask for something. I cannot stand that. Hey, can I get 10 minutes with you so I can tell you about this great software that's going to make your life so much better? Gotten to the
If you
point
can give
I get
us
spam
35
calls.
minutes on our podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten to this point now. I was like, yeah, sure. I charge minimum $200 an hour. And so we can chat. And then now they disappear. And I guess they don't, but I mean, that's the reverse solicitation. You're not going to pay me $200 an hour. I'm not going to give you 15 minutes for the 50th software of the month for me
Yes.
to review.
And it's all AI. All of
It
it is
is.
AI right
Yes,
now.
it is.
All right. Well, I don't know. Um, I don't know what you experienced from the job market and how long you've been doing it. What advice do you have for someone that's maybe newly unemployed? They've been unemployed for a long time and they've hit a wall. Do you have any advice from them from a previous business leader and HR leader perspective, but also from your current arrangement? And I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Natasha had an exit plan at the company she was at and all of that. So it's not like Natasha sitting here got canned because she was a horrible employee and all that stuff. So that's not the case. But what advice do you have for someone that's maybe just frustrated? They're months into a search. Any advice for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I've always been, but I'm a big believer and I'm resilient, and you kind of have to be resilient, especially in this job market. So I have kept my routine. I wake up, I still have horses at home, so I do my farm chores at 5 a.m. I work out from 6 to 7, take my child to school, and then I start what I consider my work day or my job search day. So from 8 to 5, I'm still keeping my 8 to 5. I'm connecting, I'm networking, I'm spending time on LinkedIn. I'm doing thoughtful posts. I'm responding to people. I've done a couple speaking engagements, but I have kept myself busy in the work. I've taken a couple more courses. I have a couple more that I've already just to keep myself learning as I'm growing during this experience and really reflecting on what have I done. Riley, that was a great, what do you bring to the table, right? How do I, present that this is what you bring to the table? But something will happen. I believe in right time, right place. It's always kind of been there, right? And if you're in the wrong direction, it's going to redirect you. But you got to be resilient. And I know that's easier said than done. And it does emotionally hurt when you continually getting, the rejects from, the applies, and it just is constant. But you just got to move on, clear that, move to the next thing.
Yeah. So I'll wrap up here after this, but I'm curious, from an HR perspective, I get employees all the time throughout my whole career that they will spend, 3 months, 6 months in a job and they're looking to promote or to change jobs or something in the organization. I I have an opinion of that, but I'm curious what yours is and what your feedback is to those people, because you've probably had those people in your career. What is your feedback in response to those people that are looking, to change jobs every 3 months inside an organization?
I have had quite a few of those in my career, and what I really think is they don't understand the reality of what the work actually is. So, how do you grow your career when you haven't sat in a seat long enough to really understand what does that look like? What does this role, mean? What do I need to learn from this? I listened to a Navy SEAL speak, and it was something that resonated with me. She's like, if you are going to be a glorified janitor, be the best glorified janitor you can be in your entire life. Because, right, she's a female Navy SEAL. They usually don't get the best jobs. And she ended up having a phenomenal career because she made the determination whatever job title you give me, I'm going to be the best at that job, the best I can be, no matter what it is. So I think that's where some people come in and they're ready to move to the next role, but they haven't been the best in that, current role that they're sitting in. And they're kind of a misalignment of what their expectations are to what the pace of work is, what the job really entails. And I think, they're misaligned as well. So, they just want to move, but they don't really understand why they want to move.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Natasha, I know we're coming up on 40 plus minutes. I have had an amazing time chatting with you today. It's great to have a senior HR experienced person on here to really bring HR insights outside of just Briley and me, but what other industries and experts are seeing from an employee perspective, from a development perspective, from an organization angle, job search angle, all these different pieces that come into it. And look, guys, if you're watching today, everyone has challenges, whether we're in a position and there's obstacles in the role or we don't get what we want in the workplace. And I think that is probably a big challenge that we're seeing in the newer generations in the workplace is that there's always been challenges in the workplace for decades and centuries, right? Everybody always had challenges. It's just that we didn't give up after the challenge. And a lot of times now with the newer generations, when there's a challenge that comes, we're just easy to write it off and go find another job. Or, hey, I don't want to do this. Let me move into a different role. Let me do that. And I challenge you to face those obstacles, find the solutions. That's what's going to build the adversity in your career, build your professionalism and everything that you're doing, and going to really set those experiences up for learning opportunities and growth within your career and your organization and where you want to go. So as we wrap up, Natasha, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for spending the day with us, spending some time with us, and really diving into that. And for Briley Jeff Coat, I'm James Callender here with HRVO Workplace Guide. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.